All right, so Ellen, take it away.
Well, thank you, Anne, for that very lovely and generous introduction. I'll echo one thing is I do find it really important to get a lot of different perspectives, especially on such a complex topic as to how we're going to make this energy transition to sustainability. So I consider myself really fortunate that I've had the opportunity to see it from a number of different angles. We do have a lot of research at ASU. I chose not to, bore you with any of the technical details, and so this is much more, a high level on what's happening with hydrogen and why we're very excited about hydrogen. And if you're not already excited about hydrogen, I hope you will be before long. So, but before I go too far, Anne mentioned that I don't know if I know some people on this call certainly know about LightWorks, but I suspect many of you don't. So I just wanted to give a brief introduction because LightWorks is the reason I'm at ASU and very excited to be so. At LightWorks, it's a campus-wide initiative. It encompasses every aspect of the university. And what we try to do is pull together light-inspired research under one strategic framework. We do, like I suspect most of you, envision a resilient and equitable energy future. And we do that, we expect that to happen through innovations, not only in technology, we are tech geeks for sure, but in technology, policy, law, governance, and markets. And we are especially focused on breakthroughs that'll achieve energy security and energy justice, and especially inspire future generations. And my optimism for the future, because sometimes I can get pretty pessimistic, although I'm optimistic by nature, it's when I see the youth and even the high school students that are just so innovative and amazing. We just had the International Science and Engineering Fair done entirely virtual, which was a shame, but still gives real optimism because there's just talented students from all age groups all over the world. We do focus on the energy transition and especially how we're going to get from where we are today to where we need to be for a sustainable future. And we love to collaborate. We collaborate with like spirit as opposed to like-minded. I make that distinction quite deliberately. So we do like to collaborate with people that share this common vision. And what I said early on was, it's light inspired. So a lot of that means solar energy. And I probably don't need, given that this is a working group on solar and energy efficiency, but I think it's worth stating nonetheless that why solar is, besides the fact that it's highly scalable, but it's also extremely democratic, meaning that it's distributed much more equitably than any other natural resource, especially when you compare it to oil and natural gas and some critical elements. Everyone, anywhere can participate in the energy transition when it's going to be based on solar, which it undoubtedly will be. So a few basics on hydrogen. I really don't know exactly what everybody knows or doesn't know about hydrogen. So some of this is just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page. And forgive me if I tell you stuff you already know. I don't know how to get this so I can see my own slides. There must be a way to do this. Here we go. So needless to say, probably, hydrogen is very abundant. It's the lightest element on the periodic table. I am a chemist. I love the periodic table. It's most versatile in its binding to other elements. And as such, it is actually only bound to other elements. Molecular hydrogen is, once we produce it, a clean fuel that when consumed, say, for example, in a fuel cell, produces nothing other than water, and very clean water. It actually can be, people are showing you can drink it right out of the tailpipe of a fuel cell, if you will. Hydrogen can be produced from a variety of domestic resources. Hydrogen is bound up in a lot of a lot of materials, such as natural gas. It can be made from nuclear power. It can be made from biomass, from forest waste, and also from renewables such as solar and wind. It can be used in cars, in houses, in portable power, and many other applications. I'll touch on as many as I can while trying to stay to time. It is an energy carrier, and it could be used to store, to move, to deliver energy that's produced from other sources. Solar is great, but it has to be packaged before it can be used or converted. And today, the hydrogen fuel, while it can be produced from quite a different number of methods, the most common method today is steam reforming of natural gas, or steam methane reforming. So some people tell me, I kind of like the colors of hydrogen. Some people hate talking about the colors of hydrogen, but it's worth knowing when people sort of start talking about hydrogen, there are different quote unquote colors. So if we make it from coal, and by the way, there is a nearly a $500 million, at least Australia dollar project to export hydrogen from coal to Japan. That started earlier this year. That's called brown hydrogen, because it is the quote dirtiest. It has the largest CO2 footprint. The next, and that's how most of hydrogen is made today, is steam reforming. More than 95% of hydrogen production, and we do produce a lot of hydrogen, I'll come back to that, is made from natural gas. We start getting to what's called blue hydrogen, and there's getting a lot more interest. There's actually a project starting up in New Mexico on blue hydrogen, which is made from natural gas, but then capture the CO2 and sequester it. And in New Mexico especially, there's some really good geological places to put that CO2. And then it's green when it's produced from clean energy with no net carbon emissions, so we don't have to worry about what we do with the CO2 emissions, even if we could capture them. So those are the colors: brown, gray, blue, green. Probably hear it again. So global demand for hydrogen, hydrogen is not new. It's hardly new. We've been making a lot of hydrogen, and it's been growing at a pretty fast clip. It's tripled within 4 decades, so tripled since 1975, and it continues to rise, kind of unabated. And that's with only basically 2 major applications that we use hydrogen today. That's for ammonia production, quite a bit of it, and for refineries for making all of our finished products from fossil fuels. So as I say, it's made right today gray and brown, mostly gray, but 6% of global natural gas is used to make hydrogen, and 2% of coal is made to make hydrogen. So that says about 25% of the hydrogen is actually from coal, which is a little bit more than, well, 2% of coal is used for it doesn't mean 25% of hydrogen. I stand corrected to myself. Okay. Also, besides the hydrogen that we're using today, we're starting to see new applications. I mean, fuel cells are not new, but we haven't used them a lot, but we have crossed the 1 gigawatt threshold, 25-fold increase in electrolyzers, that's advanced water splitting, so making green hydrogen if it's made from renewables, that have been deployed just in the last decade. Of course, 25-fold increases from a small base, so 2010, less than 1 megawatt to over 25 megawatts, which is still not that large yet, but fuel cells have passed the 1 gigawatt. There's more than 25,000 fuel cell electric vehicles. So when we talk about electric vehicles, I like to be very careful to distinguish between battery electric and fuel cell electric. They're both electric powertrains, but you know where we get the electricity is different. But they're both nice on that electric powertrain that people really do like a lot. So over 25,000 of those, more than 12,000 were sold in 2019 versus less than half that in 2018, and a growing number of fueling stations globally. So that's growing pretty quickly. So Ann asked a little bit about some hydrogen opportunities. So as I say, today it's ammonia and refineries, but as we're making this energy transition to a cleaner energy grid and a cleaner energy economy, the hydrogen actually can enable that large-scale renewable integration and power generation. It can act as a buffer and increase resilience. It can help decarbonize transportation, help decarbonize industrial energy use, building heat and power, and it can serve as a renewable feedstock because we make plastics and we make a lot of things from petroleum today that ultimately we're going to have to make from something else. So it really can contribute to a broad range of the difficult, actually, to decarbonize applications, and even some of the ones that, maybe we can imagine decarbonizing with electricity, but that might not necessarily be the best way. We'll see. So some of the, how other cities and applications, like almost every day, we're seeing new applications and new demonstrations and pilot plants, actually more around the world, and now the U.S. is starting to play catch up pretty quickly. So, for example, there's more than a half a gigawatt of stationary power using hydrogen. Forklifts have been a pretty interesting first mover, and some of the advantages with forklifts are partially because they're indoors, and so to say, it burns very clean. So there's no criteria pollutants. It's quiet, and all you get is water as a byproduct. Fuel cell buses, those are we're going to start seeing more and more of those because they have a lot of advantages over battery electric. There's more hydrogen retail stations, and even fuel cell cars. I learned a long time ago, and didn't mention this, but I used to work for Ford Motor Company, and I learned don't bet against Toyota. And Toyota is still pretty excited about their fuel cell vehicles, and other OEMs are starting to make and commercialize fuel cell vehicles. Of course, California is leading the way, but a number of other states, Hawaii, Ohio, South Carolina, New York, are doing all kinds of demonstrations with hydrogen. Notice I don't see anything in Arizona yet, and even there in New Mexico, but that's going to change very soon. And we're going to start seeing dots on this map. I forget when, this is probably already well outdated. So globally, the Hydrogen Council is a global industry partnership, and they project and projected a little while ago a 10x, up to a 10x increase in the hydrogen demand by 2050. And importantly, they project as much as 18% of final energy. Now, I've seen projections, maybe as low as 5% and as high as 25%. So the 18% is probably some of the mid-range projections, but it's not unrealistic. It could abate with that 6 gigatons of CO2. Very importantly, as economic development, something we're all focused on, they project a $2.5 trillion business. And what kind of big economic opportunity would we be ignoring if we didn't pay attention to that? And that includes annual sales from both the hydrogen itself and the equipment that uses the hydrogen. And just as importantly, that's 30 million jobs. This is globally. So in the U.S., that's still a lot of jobs projected from both producing hydrogen and using hydrogen and distributing hydrogen. So 2.5 terawatts is that projection, and tenfold increase. So they call it 10 million is their goal. 10 million systems, 10,000 stations within 10 years. That would be quite aggressive growth, but a lot of countries are building strategies, and the U.S. is probably actually a little bit behind the curve on having a strategic goal for hydrogen. So taking a little bit of a step back, coming back to a comment I made about using hydrogen in the difficult to abate. So this is the CO2 emissions. I really like this chart. It's data from IRENA, but I stole the chart from a Department of Energy presentation. And what they've done here is they've hashtagged where the hashtags are, is where there really isn't a good economical means to abate the CO2 emissions today, and that's iron and steel, cement, chemicals, alumina, a lot of mining, heavy freight, long distance transport. And all of these are sectors that hydrogen can help decarbonize. And then also firming up the last part of the difficult to decarbonize on the electric grid, because we will need long duration storage, and batteries are not going to get us through some really bad weather events, or when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. We can't do 100% electricity, firm electric grid with just batteries and solar and wind, and some nuclear. We like nuclear in Arizona for sure. But that was showing sort of global where the CO2 is. I just thought, since this is Arizona, and Clark Miller put this together, and I hear he's one of your advisors, for a workshop we did with SRP last fall, or actually November, almost fall winter time. This is where CO2 is in Arizona, and some of it certainly falls in that difficult to abate, like cement and jet fuel for aviation, and then again, firming up the grid to get to all the way to 100%. So what are some of the challenges? And I don't know if Anne, if anybody wanted, if you want to interrupt with questions, all right, I'll keep going.
I was going to say, we had a couple of questions with regards to, let's see here, as far as Arizona's, kind of devoid of hydrogen production right now. Lars had mentioned Nikola motors as well. And why are the large auto manufacturers not jumping on H2 light duty sedan or pickup markets? Perhaps you have some insights into that?
Oh, yeah. Well, certainly as Nikola takes off, and they have, what's sometimes called the Nikola rate. So they did negotiate a good rate to make hydrogen. So we will almost certainly, as Nikola gets the production of their fuel cell trucks, and they want, I believe, to sell a combination trucks and fueling. And Phoenix area is, on the I-10 route. So I would expect we will certainly see electrolyzer and hydrogen and something in Arizona before very long. Heather might know more from, and APS probably knows more. But so that's why I kind of did want to say that I believe that that map is a little out of date already, and I don't think it was made more than 6 months ago. So yes, what Nikola is doing is very exciting.
And are there other companies in Arizona to watch specifically regarding hydrogen? Just some of the demos that maybe will come along from the H2 at scale from DOE with making hydrogen from nuclear. Hopefully a project will get off the ground around making,
hydrogen from the nuclear plant, but we'll see.
Great, thank you.
I hope so. Really hope that happens. Okay, any other questions? Or, no?
I think you can, yeah, I think you can go on.
So actually, while there, on the one hand, we have a lot of technology that we can, and a lot of advanced research in more technology for sure. It is primarily the main challenge is cost. Affordable distribution and infrastructure, affordable generation, affordable storage. It's all about affordability. Of course, safety. I like to say any combustible fuel must be deeply respected, but not to be feared. Like we don't fear gasoline in our tanks in our cars. Safety, there's a lot of attention to safety and also to global standards. But of course, I would be amiss to not say that isn't still something to pay very close attention to, but definitely clear paths to making a hydrogen economy safe, and getting to affordability is still the bigger challenge. Although, as say, right now, over 500 miles of hydrogen pipelines exist, 300 miles in Europe, and in terms of that affordable storage, the most affordable, is bulk storage in salt caverns. There are already 2 in Texas. There's now one that is starting to be brought online in Utah with the Los Angeles Water and Power Department working with Utah on another salt cavern and a demo project. I don't know that there's wonderful geology in Arizona, but there's some. So affordable storage that's geographically independent would be really nice to have. Then distribution pipelines. I know Will's on the line. Pipelines probably right now the most affordable for distributing hydrogen, but there's other avenues that are being looked at. So that's where, the barriers and the challenges. It's all about getting cost down, and of course, greater deployment will also begin to get cost down. Although there was an announcement just a week ago, I think that's coming up, as to a new goal on the cost targets. So in terms of adoption, I grabbed this slide that was just presented a week ago. I thought it was really it shows sort of 2 things at the same time. Is one, it shows some of the applications, but it also shows kind of a cost target where without a cost on carbon, which I think many of us are hoping will happen and is likely to happen, without a cost to carbon, where we would have to get to. I should have mentioned steam methane reforming right now is about $1.50 a kilogram of hydrogen. So that's how we make hydrogen today, but it's got the carbon signature. We can make hydrogen much cleaner, even with some early adoption in that medium and heavy duty vehicles. So Nikola is in a pretty good sweet spot as they start to deploy those trucks. And it's not just Nikola. I think, Ann, you asked the question about why aren't other OEMs? Other OEMs are definitely jumping into the game. So number of them have a truck. I think Daimler has, Hyundai has, Toyota is moving into the truck market. Ford has, more the plug-in hybrid. They do have fuel cells, but I don't know if they're going to be commercializing or not.
And Ellen, can you remind people what OEM stands for?
Oh, the original equipment manufacturers. So like Ford Motor Company, GM, they're considered OEMs.
Okay, so great, thank you.
They integrate, and then, they have a very substantial supply. So they're called the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. Sustainable aviation fuels looks like they think it could come in at about $4. I should have mentioned hydrogen. A kilogram of hydrogen has about the same energy as a gallon of gasoline. So that's kind of why kilogram tends to be the unit that we all use on hydrogen. I'd question sustainable aviation being able to come in at a $3 hydrogen because you still have to make the fuel, but their analysis suggested the next market would be sustainable aviation fuels. Ammonia is a good one, renewable ammonia. And then you need renewable hydrogen. You're going to make renewable ammonia. Then synthetic fuels, iron and steel, injection into the natural gas infrastructure, and energy storage. And that could get us to about 10 to 20%. But what they're claiming is that's why we have to get down to about $100 a kilogram. That will unlock the market potential. And if there's a price on carbon, you might be able to get that back up to $2 a kilogram. But the target is now $1 a kilogram. So just announced a week ago, June 7th, by the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. And if you haven't listened to her, she's quite a spitfire. She's got so much energy and optimism, and she's really a breath of fresh air. They announced the first energy Earthshot, which is the hydrogen energy Earthshot hydrogen shot. And they call it 1 for 1 in 1. $1 for 1 kilogram in 1 decade. So that's the new go. We've been working really hard for many years to try to get to $2 a kilogram, and they just upped it on us to figure out how to get to 1. So on benefits, needless to say, I think hydrogen really is a clean and versatile energy carrier or an energy vector. It has the ability to couple the sectors. It has the ability to impact decarbonization in virtually every sector. It adds diversity. So even in electricity, where we have other ways to make electricity, maybe only need 5, 10%, probably maximum hydrogen on the grid, but that 5 to 10% can make a huge difference in shoring up both resiliency and reliability. And it can contribute to resilience and to disaster recovery. We can export or import with a lot of lessons learned from LNG. It can be a reductant. I briefly mentioned iron and steel, but as a reductant, what it means is it can pull oxygen out of wherever you need to pull oxygen out, which is what you need to do to make steel, or pulling oxygen out of biomass to make biofuels, higher energy density. You can make various co-products such as oxygen, which could be used maybe in copper mining, which is important to Arizona. You can react it with CO2, make the synthetic hydrocarbons, liquid fuels, or synthetic natural gas. One I like is dimethyl ether. And as I mentioned, the Hydrogen Council does project as much as 18% of the energy system and $2.5 trillion in annual sales. I did mention that it can integrate both electric and the natural gas grids. We do have, and I don't think we should be ignoring the fact that we do have 2.44 million miles of natural gas distribution pipelines in the U.S. We got 400 underground storage facilities. We got compressor stations. In making the transition and utilizing the infrastructure we have is a good way to get started. 977 gigawatts of natural gas, just 5% of hydrogen into the natural gas, 5% by energy or 5% even, by volume is a big amount of energy. And at those levels, we can probably put it into the existing infrastructure. To get to pure hydrogen, well, that's a different story. I kind of like this slide I grabbed from Toyota quite a few years ago now. This is where Toyota kind of envisions the trade-off between, there's always the question of, battery electric versus fuel cell electric. Nikola's already come up. They're building the fuel cell electric trucks for 600-mile range. And they're working on the fueling infrastructure as well. But it's the short range, low weight. Okay, that's a good spot for battery electric. That's the the blue down here, but if you get to really high weight and long distance, that's like aviation and long distance shipping, you probably want liquid hydrocarbons, and in between there's a lot of space where hydrogen can fill in the gap. I'll just mention on the research frontier that DOE, it's all about and industry, all about accelerating the R&D to reduce the cost and get to demonstrations so we de-risk and get to deployment, because the best mechanism to decreasing cost is deployment. But we need to de-risk, a little bit of a chicken and an egg, if you will, de-risk with demonstrations. And I think most people these days are thinking about clusters where we co-locate supply and demand and enable a lot of infrastructure, a lot of shared infrastructure that'll help get a lot of the cost and the risk out. And so expecting to see hydrogen hubs. The first one was announced in LA with the Hydeal LA. I think we'll see other of those announced around the country. I know a number of states are starting to think about how they become a hydrogen hub where you can co-locate a lot of infrastructure and don't have to build out too much, all across the country at the outset. There is an RFI on the street if anybody's interested in responding to DOE on the needs. But that's sort of the strategy these days. And my last slide, a question always comes up, and a question that we ask ourselves, and I'm certainly no expert here, is on the regulatory complexity and what it means to build out a lot more hydrogen. So we use a lot of hydrogen, so there really is a lot of regulatory out there. But Sandia National Labs recently did a really, really nice study where they laid out all of the agencies, and there's a long list here, and the entire supply chain that would be important to hydrogen, and identified the gaps. Some regulations on natural gas are really about combustible gases will apply. Some are very specific to natural gas. So this is a space also to keep an eye on if we start moving seriously into what I would love to see, which is Arizona use some of its land and sun to make hydrogen, not just for our own uses, but for export, and become, move from an energy importing state to an energy exporting state. And I think I am done.